Welcome to Death by Disney, the podcast and YouTube channel where I review Disney films, all of them. I'm on a mission to watch all of them. I haven't done an episode in a long time because I've been focused on my other podcast, Leverton on Everything, where I review literally everything. And as you can imagine, with the title like that, it's a bit time consuming. But during the making of that podcast and recording the videos for that podcast, I discovered that I really liked Bette Davis as an actress. Like, she was a really surprising delight for me. I first watched a movie of hers called All About Eve, and that still is probably my favorite Bette Davis film. But I got interested in her career, so I went back and I watched various things and got really, really interested in her career. And I think that she is unique because she is the first Hollywood actress who was actually an actress and not a star. Because before that, Hollywood had this star system where it was more important to be glamorous and be beautiful on screen for women. And Bette Davis changed that. Like, certainly she was attractive and she had that same kind of interest, but she would take roles that other actresses wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole at the time, like of Human Bondage, where she plays a woman who kind of takes advantage of a guy and dies of tuberculosis. So it kind of reminds me, although they're not the same level, Charlize Theron taking on the role of Eileen Wuornos in the film Monster, where people were like, why would you make yourself so ugly for a role? And I think Bette Davis and Theron would understand why, because the role is the interesting thing. So, back to this movie. I'm reviewing a movie from, what year is it from? It's from 1980, and it's called The Watcher in the Woods, and it was released by Walt Disney Studios, and this was at a time when Disney was releasing a lot of live action films to appeal to that kind of target demographic that they kind of missed. So basically, Disney is really good for parents with children and young children, but this was more for people who, teenagers, young adults, and stuff. So they produced a few movies like this, but this one is basically a supernatural sci-fi horror film, and it involves this American family who goes to live in a sort of big house in the countryside in England, and they meet this lady played by Bette Midler. Not Bette Midler. Oh my God, Jesus Christ! Sorry, by Bette Davis. Bette Davis. Bette Davis. Bette Midler. Oh, that's a name. She was an actress too. I always didn't like her. I just didn't like her personality. But anyway, that's a different story. Bette Davis. By Bette Davis. And yeah, so it also stars. So it's directed by John Hugh and Vincent McEverly, and it's based on A Watcher in the Woods by Florence Engel Randall, and it stars Bette Davis, Carol Baker, David McCallum, and others, and I won't go through the rest. I think the important part is to focus on Bette Davis and Carol Baker. So, actually, no. Carol Baker is the not the main actress. It's Lynn-Holly Johnson. So Carol Baker actually does a fine job. Like, respectable job in this movie. So basically, I told you the plot. I didn't. They moved to this place in the English countryside, and Betty Davis's daughter has disappeared like 20 years earlier, and there are some supernatural and spooky things that are happening at this place, and the daughter of the family that moves in, the older daughter, played by the actress I mentioned, by Lynn-Holly Johnson, she kind of starts to see all of these visions, and she starts to be caught up in this whole plot connected to the disappearance of the Betty Davis's daughter. And it involves like a secret cult, like a secret society, and aliens and mysticism and all of that stuff. So let me start. What do I think about the movie? Let me start with the positives of the movie. Well, there's two big positives of the movie, but they don't save the movie at all. So the first one is there are parts that are genuinely eerie and scary. There's a few jump scares, and then the movie is really good at making you feel like there are places where you shouldn't be. You know, like, have you ever been walking in the woods and it's all probably in your mind, but you're like, this feels eerie. I shouldn't be here. Oh, this is scary. I got lost maybe about a year or two ago in the woods, and I was like, oh, like it felt like a horror movie for me. So it feels like the movie is really, really good at doing that. There's like some eerie things. The special effects for the most part are good until we get to the end, but we'll talk about that in a moment. And I'll talk about the other good thing in a moment as well, but before I talk about the good thing, I need to talk about the really bad thing, which is all of the actors and actresses in this movie, with the exception of Bette Davis and Carol Baker, are horrible. They don't know how to act. And with Lynn-Holly Johnson, it makes sense because she was actually a figure skater, and she got a role in one movie, and the casting director would saw her in that movie and said, oh, she'd be good in this. But every line that she gives is like at 150 level, so there's no drama and terror in her voice. It's just everything is scary, everything is bad, everything is out to get me. And you don't have that like modulation in her voice, which kind of makes things more interesting. And so that's the main problem with there's another big problem with the movie, which I'll tell you about in a moment. But the other good thing about this is actually Bette Davis's performance. And this was not the last movie that she made, but I believe it was the last studio movie that she made. And she I lost my train of thought because I moved. But so basically, Bette Davis is, as I said, Bette Davis at this point has had maybe about 50 years, probably 60, close to 60 years of experience as an actress. And when she was at the top of her game, she was one of the best actresses, cinema actresses ever, right? So she is in this really dog awful, I was about to say a bad word, she's in a really bad movie right now, and she's with actors who can't act. And what she's doing is actually so clever, and it's actually pretty interesting to watch, because and it's not just the ex-figure skater that I mentioned, it's most of the acting except for Carol Baker. So she's in constant dialogue with child actors or people who are older, who are not technically child actors, but they're acting like child actors. And she is trying to modulate in the scene their emotions, right? So so Betty Davis, so she'll get a line reading that will be like, ah, and then she'll be like, very quiet, very calm, like, can you repeat what's happening? You know, and there'll be close-ups of her face, and her face acting. I mean, I don't know if that's a word or not, but her face acting is so brilliant because she just move a line or like move a wrinkle or something, or you'll see some emotion on her face, and you'll see like these people are giving their like 250%. They're like super enthusiastic. They're like trying to act. They're trying to really act. And then Betty Davis is showing like you don't need to give 250% all of the time. You need to give like a realistic amount of effort to this or reading of this, because a girl is not going to be hysterical all of the time in this kind of situation. She might be hysterical a few times, and Betty Davis was a ham. Like, there are movies in which she's like completely overreacting to things, so it's not like she is beyond that, but I think like this is one of her best performances actually, because you can contrast it with the horrible performances she's surrounded by, and she's just like restrained, classy lady, and she she's doing her best to save this pile of crap basically. Yeah, I think it's one of the worst Disney movies I've seen, and it's one of the worst. It's the worst movie with Betty Davis in it, although Betty Davis is not at fault at this. And I criticized another movie called Murder with Mirrors, which was a made for TV Miss Marple movie she made later, like maybe about 5 years after this. But this is much worse. This is much, much worse because, like, the overacting is like the lack of acting, overacting, lack of emotion, whatever. And then because you have people who can act, and then you have people who can't act, or they're not able to act in these scenes. And I think it's just a question of direction, right? Because you need to get the best out of whatever talent you have. And like, if I had this, I'm sorry to keep bringing her up, but it's the worst part of the movie. If I had Lynn-Holly Johnson in my movie and she was reading lines like she was reading, I would have a heart attack probably. But first, before having a heart attack, I'd be like, okay, you're reading this line at 100%. Try to read it at like 5%. Like, go down a lot. Like, and I think that direction was really, really, really bad. So the direction connected to the acting is bad. And then, so they released the first version of this movie as sort of like a pre-release, and the reception that it got was absolutely horrible. Nobody liked it. So they cut a lot out of the movie, and then they wanted to have a new ending. And I think I will just check Wikipedia here to see if I will be correct. Da, 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 da. Okay, so Hanson Allenshaw, the visual effects designer, later stated that there were roughly 152 possible endings. So, and I don't think that the ending that they did is necessarily bad. I won't tell you what the ending is because I really don't want you to watch this. I'm not going to recommend it. That would be a war crime on my part to recommend this movie. But yeah, so you can really apart from the horrible acting, the other main problem is that the plot is really confusing. Because basically, if I tell you what the plot is, it makes sense, but when you watch the movie, it doesn't make sense. So the plot is, there is this girl who was abducted about 30 years ago, who is Bette Davis's daughter, and she has been abducted by aliens, right? And then another family moves in, and another daughter of that family is talking to aliens, right? And so there's a risk that this daughter will be abducted by aliens too. That's the whole plot, right? And the end of the movie is that the first daughter comes back, right? But then you have all of this weird sort of cult plot, which doesn't make any sense. And there's like three characters who were like really messed up by this whole thing. So the plot is really, really confusing. And honestly, I fell asleep a lot during this movie, and I had to wake myself up and go back because the movie, apart from the parts with Bette Davis, it's just a train wreck that's on fire and a giant dog has pooed on it. You know, it's bad. It's bad. It's like one of the worst movies I've seen, like, ever. And I think that they would never do this because it's a Disney film, but if the people from Mystery Science Theater 3000 watch this movie, I think that they would have a lot to say about it. It would be brilliant. Maybe they've already done it. I don't know. Because I think that it's not in the so bad it's good category, but if you had people who were really good at making fun of things make fun of it while you were watching, it would be in that category. But by yourself, it's danger. Do not go there. All right. So what do I think? I think that this, and the crazy thing for me is that this movie has a cult following. Like, what? Why would you willingly subject yourself to this movie? I don't know. I'm going to give this movie, for the first time ever in my life, oh, no, that's not fair to Bette Davis, though. I'm going to give it a 1 out of 10. I think the 1 is just because Bette Davis is really trying really hard and being a professional here, but she's not able to do it. Yeah. All right, so what do you think about this movie? If you think it's a cult classic, put your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you like my review style, I know it's long-winded and rambling, but at least I'm not AI. Please like and subscribe. I'm trying to get to 250 subscribers by the end of January, and I believe we have 242 at the time of this recording. If you're listening on Spotify, please give me a follow. And yeah, thank you. This has been Death by Disney. Bye-bye.